and family of the missing lunar colonists gather all around the world tonight in remembrance of the 2054 MPT blackout that resulted in a global power outage and the loss of contact with the lunar colony. The blackout caused global turmoil, which ultimately led to the closure of the World Space Agency 1 year later. In other news, the recent formation of the largest dust storm on record has prompted climatologists to readjust their forecasts of the equatorial desert's growth rate. As a result of the new storm, the desert could soon cover 30% of the globe's landmass. Several governments have...
Fortuna, are you there?
Reports of resource shortages. The dust storm is expected to hit residential zones between the northern 49th and 50th latitude lines by late afternoon. And
ground control to Fortuna 1, this is Claire. Please confirm radio contact. Radio contact confirmed. Make your way to the launch platform and prime the rocket for liftoff. We have to launch before the dust storm hits. There she is, the Taurus 5. It took us 4 years to get her ready for launch. But you need to hurry. The dust storm will hit this area in a few hours. If we don't succeed now, the Fortuna mission will be over for good. To the facility. The control center is located on the top floor. There you can prime the rocket for launch. It's been 5 years since we last received a microwave power transmission from the lunar colony. At first, no one believed it would be possible to transmit energy from the moon back to Earth, but the WSA proved the skeptics wrong. Just like you will when you get the MPT back online. This building once functioned as part of the WSA, but it's been our home for many years now. I still can't believe you'll be leaving here for good soon. The desertification of this whole region won't take long after the storm passes through. Good. You're in the control center. Get the rocket ready to launch as fast as... Calculating new storm ETA. Claire, we have a problem. The storm is approaching faster than expected. Way faster. Time's running out. Keep going, Fortuna. We've been working too long to give up now. Valves are closed. Head back inside the control center to prime the rocket for launch. The rocket is primed. You have to launch now, before the dust storm destroys the rocket and everything we've worked for. Navigation systems online. We're nearly there. It's just like your training. You can do this. Initiate launch procedure. Ground launch sequencer started. Orbital axis arm retracting. Perfect, just like was practiced. Auxiliary power units booting up. Gaseous oxygen vent arms safely in place. Sound suppression system engaged. Hydrogen burn-off system activated. Rocket boosters ready for ignition. Standing by for countdown. Rocket boosters ignition start. Engines ready in 5, 4, 3, 2, start, 1. We have liftoff! Astronauts made their way to the moon just 100 years ago. They knew an Earth full of life. All we know today is dust. If you can bring the MPT network back online, it could restore the hope humanity lost after the lunar colony fell. We could recover, rebuild, and most of all, start thinking about a future. You'll need to find the MPT transmitter at the Pearson space station. From there, the power signal was relayed to Earth. This was the final link in the MPT network before the blackout. If there are answers to find, they're at Pearson.
Claire, we need to head down to the shelter. These winds are getting bad.
Understood. Fortuna 1, this storm is going to jam radio contacts. You'll be on your own for a while. To reach the station, you must... Once you're in the... second phase of the launch. Please, deliver us the moon. by now. The storm has severely damaged our instruments, so we can't read your location or receive any messages. But we can detect fluctuations in the MPT network. If you can hear this, when you reach the control center, try to find out what's wrong with the MPT connection so you can bring it back online. Good luck up there.
Backup power activated. Life support systems online. Oxygen levels rising.
Ground control to Fortuna 1. We're still not reading anything from the MPT. Is everything under control up there?
energy supply at 40%. Life support energy supply at 20%. Life support energy supply critical. Power fully redirected from life support to rotation engine. Access control center to activate engine. Life support failure. Life support shutting down. Oxygen reserves low. Life support offline. Oxygen reserves critical. Life support offline. Oxygen reserves nearly exhausted.
Apollo 1, Pearson has started its outer ring rotation. Looks like you're making yourself
William, what the hell was that speech about?
Our next chapter, Rosa. It's time. The ships will be ready soon.
You can't be serious. I don't know how you plan to fix this mess, but you'd better do it now.
That won't be necessary. Come with me.
You are serious. Will, have you lost your mind? We can't leave the colony behind like this, not during this blackout. Not with the MPT signal still offline. People on Earth depend on us.
Don't concern yourself with them. Those days are over. We have to start the long journey ahead. That was the agreement.
The ships were supposed to be our last resort. We didn't give up the first time, and we're not giving up now. When the network is back online, we can provide Earth with power again. We're close, William.
No, we're not. We're not close at all. If you still think we can power the entirety of Earth with the MPT, you're more delusional than I thought. We have one last hope, and it's outward. Now get ready, because we're going.
I'm not leaving, Will. Not like this.
I'm not asking. Get her on the ship.
What? Is this really...
Initiating AZ maintenance protocol. Running AZ hardware diagnostic. AZ connection to Runa facility network. Failed. AZ network access port status effective. Component replacement is advised. AZ network access port replacement successful. AZ connection to Moonhub facility network established. Proceeding with AZ hardware diagnostic. AZ thruster status defective. Full thruster replacement is advised. AZ Warning. Power generator overload. Local lockdown. Power generator back online. Local lockdown cancelled. Maintenance offline. headquarters. Online. Vehicle bay offline. Crew quarters offline. Vehicle bay online.
Pearson. We saw what happened at Pearson. I thought you were... But just now, we detected activity in the MPT network.
This is Sarah Baker, lead engineer at Pearson Space Station. I was sent to investigate the blackout together with station mechanic Rolf Robertson. I was attacked by an AZ unit and lost consciousness. The reasons for this attack remain unclear. It seems my expedition partner has left, and I am unable to contact Pearson Space Station or any of the other facilities. I'm going to cross the frontier now, passing Copernicus Outpost 1, to get to Tombo and try to figure out what caused the MPT failure. Whoever finds this, please try to contact me. Alex, end recording.
Tombo track access. Denied. Communication with closest base operator. Offline. Consult operator on arrival in Reinhold Crater Base. Warning. Combo track locked. Switch tracks to avert fatal collision. Tracking successful. Warning, obstruction detected. Switch tracks to avert fatal collision. Nominal velocity critical. Activate brakes to slow down.
Evacuated? No, this can't be right. They can't just leave. The colony will fail without them. And Earth. How could they all be so goddamn selfish? What were they thinking? How can they be so...
Warning. Tombow reactor failing. Outward protocol in effect. Evacuate all facilities.
Yes, I know they evacuated. I know I'm alone.
Tombow reactor capacity at 10%.
It's still going? Alex, we have to go. This would make things right. We could fix this. We can fix this. Okay. Just follow the tracks along the pillars. You'll make it to Tombow. You'll make it, Sarah.
I'm on my way, Sarah. I'll find you.
Ground control to Fortuna 1. I'm not sure if you're still there. The dust storms, they've gotten worse. Everything has. The solution has to be at Tombow. Whether it's the reactor or the MPT transmitter itself, I can't tell. But we're at the end of the line, Rolf. We could use some good news down here. I wish I could help you.
Warning, obstruction detected. Warning. overloading. System integrity at... Releasing reserves. MPT overloading. MPT overloading. MPT overloading. MPT overloading. MPT overloading. System integrity at 50%. Allowing MPT to resume transmission and relieve pressure. MPT overloading. System integrity at 40%. MPT overloading. System integrity at 30%. MPT overloading. System integrity at 20%. Anomaly successful. Standing by to resume transmission. Transmission resumed. Connection with Earth established.
Juno 1, is this... I can't believe this. We're receiving energy. It's back online. The MPT is transmitting. All systems are running. Global reception levels are rising.